Hi, I'm Rob, and in this Gems of War video I'm going to take a look in the Soulforge and give you my opinion, what is good and bad in there. I can also look at the new weekly troop who's in the shop, and I'll be doing the World Event team later on, so all that going on today. Anyway, what do you call a magician that's lost his magic? Ian. Think about it a second. Yeah. Now it makes sense, doesn't it? Anyway, let's take a look at this. The Emerald Giant. 400 glory. You can take these all the way up to gain enough to make them automatically into a Mythic, which is the recommended thing to do if you have enough glory, but let's see what this Emerald Giant does. Deals a magic-based damage to an enemy, then converts 5 brown gems to green giant gems. Can be a massive amount of mana. If you saw the video I did yesterday, then you'll see how much mana you can get from these things. It is absolutely huge when it works. The only thing you have to be careful of with these is you can set up the opposition. On a troop like this that converts brown to green, you're better off if you're fighting a team that doesn't actually use green, because if those gems fail to align when you match them, or because you don't have an extra turn with this unless you get those automatic matches, then you're going to hand the turn over to the opposition and they can then make those matches and get a massive amount of mana instead. But against a non-green team, this could be really, really good indeed. And it uses green itself, which means it can self-charge. Traits wise, not too bad at all. Poison enemies when doing skull damage, reduce damage from skulls by 50%, and create a green giant gem when I take skull damage. So not too shabby. I'm going to give this 6 out of 10. It has definitely got some potential. Right, as ever as well, you can pop over to the Spoils of War, grab these as well. We can do this once a week, get 10 of them max. Always worth doing. 10 event keys is the best thing about this. But if you're a newer player, then 1,000 souls and gold definitely comes in handy at the same time. Right, onto the Soulforge itself. Let's take a look at the weapons first. And you can look at the ones that are new this week. I'm not going to go over all the ones that are here all the time. First up, the Elemental Bow deals damage to an enemy boosted by elemental allies. So the more elementals in your team, the more damage this is going to do. Then create a mix of 6 blue and green for each elemental ally. Uses purple and yellow, so this thing is not going to self-charge. So you do need to make sure that those elemental allies do use some blue and green as their mana colours. Otherwise, you're missing out on one of the best parts of this weapon. But if your team fulfills those requirements, then can be extremely good indeed. The Bow of Thorns. This is kind of an anti-Forest of Thorns weapon. This is the kind of thing which is handy to use when you're fighting a Forest of Thorns team. Removes all green gems, which is the colour mainly that Forest of Thorns enemies like to use. So they get removed with no effect. So just taken away from the board. Bang, like they weren't there. Gone. You can set up an extra turn from that as well if you look at the board closely. Another good thing about removing gems in that way. Then deal a damage to an enemy boosted by the gems removed. If the battle is from Forest of Thorns or if the battle is in Forest of Thorns, deal a double damage. So good against a Forest of Thorns team or enemy, or if it's in Forest of Thorns. And yeah, not too bad. Hammer of Force. Much better than a Hammer of No Force. Deals damage to an enemy with a 4% chance to kill them, boosted by elemental enemies. Yeah, so nothing fantastic about that, because even if you had an all-elemental team, that's still going to work out just a 20% chance to kill them. And it only does damage to an enemy. Something like Black Manacles does damage to all enemies and has a guaranteed 20% chance to kill people no matter what the combination of team. So, yeah, not the best. Right, these are there all the time, so no need to go over them. And Oaken Crown is the last one here. Deals damage to an enemy boosted by Forest of Thorns allies. So this is kind of the opposite of the other Forest of Thorns weapon we had. This is one that's sort of in your favour, if you like. And it's pretty good. Deals damage to an enemy boosted by Forest of Thorns allies. Then create a mix of 6 green and yellow for each Forest of Thorns ally. So this uses brown and purple, creates green and yellow. So in similar way to the other one, you need to have those requirements on your team to make the most out of this kind of weapon. So there's two which are good for a Forest of Thorns. That one, and what was the other one? Yeah, the elemental bow. So they're both in your favour for that, but this is the sort of anti Forest of Thorns weapons if you specifically want to battle those enemies in that way. Right, so let's look at the troops now. Only going to go over the mythics today. Mambasira deals a random amount of damage to 6 random enemies. So she's got 6 arms. She just wangs them around all over the place, just bashing anybody randomly. And sometimes she connects really hard, and sometimes not so much so. But can be good when it works, but I just don't like, excuse me, the randomness of the damage. But when she decides to hit the same enemy multiple times, she can actually take out somebody who you really wanted. But again, it's all a bit unreliable, shall we say. Aquaticus deals light splash damage to 3 random enemies. Explode half the blue gems on the board. Now, that's actually pretty good. If she deals that splash damage to the enemies that are in the middle, like the 2nd and 3rd place ones, then you're going to get the higher amount of damage from her. But if she chooses to hit the ones in 1st and 4th place, obviously that means less damage. And with some mana gen as well, explode half the blue gems on the board. That is going to generate some decent mana for the team. But one of the most useful things about her is that 3rd trait. Submerge all allies when matching 4 or more gems is super useful when fighting teams like Queen Beatrix or King Gobtruffle. All you got to do is get a 4 match somewhere, everyone's submerged, none of those troops can get you with their damage to all, like Gobtruffle and Queen Beatrix. So very good defending for that, worth it almost for that alone, to be honest. Shade of Zorn, more shade of complete rubbishlessness and absolute uselessness. Deals a low amount of damage to an enemy, boosted by red allies and skulls, and if the enemy dies, summon 2 Fists of Zorn. Now, I'm all for giving mythics a chance. People will know that I will try and find the good in a mythic, but everyone else has called it bad. But there's no saving this one. He's absolute crud. It really is bad. Even if you got a really good boost on that by having an all red team, and say 8 to 10 skulls, it's still rubbish damage. And they have to die to summon 2 Fists of Zorn. It's like, what? Wow. It's just, even the traits aren't going to save it. Yeah, they're not shocking, but they're hardly game-changing either. It's like shade of absolute one of the worst mythics out there. Rubbish, rubbish, rubbish. Ubastet. Still really, really good. Not as awesome it was as much as he was when he first came out, because he did have his abilities toned down a little bit. But deals damage to the 2 weakest enemies, boosted by all ally and enemy attack. If one of the enemies dies, then kill the other one, just outright. So the way you use this guy is to hit, say, with a couple of skull hits, the troop in 1st place, bring them to in range of being killed, and then you are guaranteed 2 deaths on the other side. That is really, really good. The only trouble with him is he's a bit of a one spell wonder, if you like, because even though that is very powerful initially, because you've killed 2 enemies, the amount of attack everybody has is now massively reduced, and that makes his damage suffer for the 2nd cast. So it is a lot more difficult to get the 2nd kill or the 2nd cast when you do them again. So very powerful on the 1st cast, not so much so after that, but still viable in some teams. A couple of decent traits as well. Summon a Firestorm when an enemy dies can be useful, as can all ally Raksha gain 1 attack and magic at the start of every turn. Alright, and that is the mythics. Alright, push for time today, so I'm not going to go over these ones here, the legendaries, but couple of notable ones are definitely Kraken. Deal damage to the last 2 enemies, create 8 blue gems with a 35% chance to devour the last enemy is good, as is Ulf Harrigan. I mean, compare this to Shade of Zorn. Shade of Zorn does rubbish damage and has to kill someone to get a summon. This is a legendary, only uses 16 mana and deals more damage basically by a lot. Does, in my case, 40 true damage to 3 random enemies. If an enemy is wounded, deal 10 extra damage and has a guaranteed summon. It's like, even this thing's way better than Shade of Zorn. Anyway, there's the Soulforge video. All we have to do now is pick the Mythic of the Week. Ubastet, it is not bad. It's still really good. Really powerful on the first cast. Not so much after that, though. Shade of Zorn, if it was a joke, then maybe. And Mambasira, just a little bit too random. So my Mythic of the Week is going to go to Aquaticus. Good damage when she hits the correct enemies. Good mana gen if there's lots of blue there as well. And a fantastic defense against damage to all enemies. So Aquaticus gets my Mythic of the Week. Got the World event team coming up later on. So check that out later on. But most of all, thanks for watching. Hit the like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video or found it useful. And I'll catch you again next time. Bye for now.